Hello and welcome back to the Spirit of Creating. And for today's podcast episode, I wanted to talk about creating art without expectation. And I think there's a preconceived idea that when we create art, we're doing it just for the love of the creating process. And I think that can be a bit of a white lie, because behind it, there's an element of expectation that we can come to the table with. And I think right now we live in a world where everything has an expectation or an outcome attached to it. You know, we don't walk anywhere without counting our 10,000 steps. We have a watch that tells us how far we've walked, how much we slept, how much water we've drank. You know, we're never just doing something without an element of expectation attached to the end of it. We monitor what we eat and we divide it into our macros, and everything has an outcome-based way of living. And I think we bring that to the table when it comes to creating our own art. I don't think we come without expectation. So whether it's expecting it to be a great piece of art, whether we're expecting to feel beautiful in the process of creating it, whether we want to be able to sell that piece and what that means to us, if it does sell or if it doesn't, whether we're just after a lot of vanity metrics from Instagram and we just want loads of likes for it. Either way, we are creating for the sake of an outcome. We're not really creating just for the sake of creating. And I'm intrigued by the outcome of creating art without expectation and then creating art with it. And I do believe that the art itself as an outcome carries the weight of that expectation. And I think it can show in the pieces of art that are then created. Because with the expectation, there's an element that we hold back. We're not in complete freedom when we're creating, because in the back of our minds, there's a thought going on that we're expecting this process and we're expecting the art to perform something for us by the end of it and by the very act of us creating it. We're not in complete freedom and just channeling our energy towards that art for zero outcome, just for the sake of creating. And I've done it before. I've done it lots of times. I've created with a whole heap of expectation, and then I've created without. And the two are very different. If I'm creating and someone's watching me, I did a residency recently and people could come and watch me paint. And the difference in the outcome and the difference in the feeling for me when I was creating with the expectation of others' eyes on me and my own expectations because I was being watched were hugely different from how I felt and what I created when I was just on my own, where I didn't have any expectation and I wasn't worried about anyone else's ideas about what I was creating. There was a complete freedom in that. And I think when I create on a deadline for a commission or for a company, that's a completely different feel to when I'm just creating for the sake of creating because I want to that day. And there's a level of balance we've got to find, because if we are making a living creating art, there are going to be some levels of expectation that need to be met. But I'm more talking about our own art practices. And even when we are creating for our own sake, are we genuinely coming to the table to make art without expectation and with an element of freedom in it, which I think is more conducive for the long run and is more sustainable than if we're continually coming to the table with expectation. It's one thing to have to meet some demands or a deadline or guidelines towards a piece of art, and then there's an expectation there. But to create constantly like that would be draining. There does have to be a balance. We do then have to take time out and just create for our own sakes and for our enjoyment and for that the spaciousness of creation, and not with all these bundled expectations on top of it. So it'd be really interesting to hear any of your experiences, if you've ever really created with only expectation on the table, or whether you always create completely freely, and what your outcomes are. So if you have any questions or comments about this episode, please let me know at illustratingrain@gmail.com, and I shall be back next week with another episode. Bye.